So welcome everyone online. And if you have any questions, you can message me directly. The chat will be on and off depending on what the teachers are doing, but we will be together as a community, and honored to be here with all of you.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm so grateful that Yupai can offer, for those who are online, the means to be here. And actually, almost 3,500 people have registered, which is kind of awesome. But and we had also a long waiting list for on-site, and it's why we asked people who want to come just in and out. We're here as a community, building a community that is online and on-site, a community also of our residents and staff, our practitioners and senior teachers. It's one body, just what Bernie taught so deeply, and also really the spirit of interbeing, how we weave our lives together, as Rebecca shared last night in her staggering talk. I said, tighten up your seatbelts. I said to Rebecca, every single sentence is like a jewel. And if now I want to go back and read or re-listen both. And you can re-listen. The recordings are put immediately up on the resource page. And so that's one of the really special things that we're able to do, thanks to Kodo and Manny and Bonnie, all the people under the hood of all this that make it possible for being able to be here in whatever way is possible. And apropos of that, truly your donations make it possible. We couldn't do this without your support. So I just encourage you to enjoy the practice of generosity, the sort of the first paramita, the first perfection of the bodhisattvas. It really makes a difference in us being able to bring all of these resources to so many. So I want to just pivot for a minute to say something about story. And beloved Terry and Rebecca also are going to be diving into the story body, the story as a compass for our lives, story as a compass for our society, but also as an obstacle when the framing is based on the preconscious experience of greed, hatred, and delusion. And I will say that our own orientation here at Upaya, which is around social and environmental engagement, I get these emails from literally all over the world. I'm not interested in your woke dharma. I said, and I write every one of them back. And I say, and I mean it, there are 10,000 dharma doors and 10,000 opinions. There are 10,000 stories and 10,000 views. But the thing that is clear is that those of us who come into this relationship between social and environmental responsibility and contemplative practice have been deeply influenced by the life of the Buddha, by the life of Ashoka, who lived several hundred years after the Buddha, by Buddhism going to China and encountering this vision of the Bodhisattva path, where monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen could all enjoy the richness of the Dharma. No one was excluded. by movements in China during the Tang Dynasty to actually engage in practices and in service similar to what we know today that actually influenced the later Buddhism in China and Japan. And then we think also jumping centuries ahead to Ambedkar and ordaining 380,000 so-called untouchables, Dalits, as a kind of movement, a transformation out of the oppressive structures within the Hindu context into the Buddhist frame of reference, which had been denormalized at the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha flattened out the Sangha and disavowed the caste system. And then heroes who were alive during, and heroines during our lifetime, my lifetime. Mahagosananda, who walked the killing fields. Sulaks, Shivaraksa, whom incredible stalwartness, outspokenness in relation to the sort of imperial process in Thailand, to the ordaining of trees, to our beloved Thich Nhat Hanh, who came to our country in the mid-60s and told us, dial down your violence toward my country. To Bernie Glassman, Joanna Macy, so many, and beloved Alan Senaki. Buddhism has an extraordinary history of social engagement. And I want to just refer now to the life of the Buddha, because there are three different valences, if you will, different frames with which we could look at the life of the Buddha. And I'm not going to do the big picture, but only to say there is what we know as the historical Buddha, where the everyday life of the Buddha is explicated, where his discoveries in terms of his own mental landscape brought the teachings forward that are pragmatic through his empirical testing and discoveries in relation to allowing himself to drop deeply into this stillness and silence, which we invite us all to drop into. So there is the historical Buddha, and there's also our personal lives, in a way paralleling to the frame of the historical Buddha per se. That is, what happened really. I mean, the legendary Buddha is another frame, but the historical Buddha was probably born more into a kind of tribal situation. The legendary Buddha, of course, was born into an imperial situation. And the legendary Buddha, in a certain way, reflects a quality of awakening, an archetypal frame of reference, a mythic frame of reference. The story of the Buddha's life is in a way pointing toward our own capacities for a kind of glorious awakening. Whereas you understand from the point of view of the historical Buddha, he kind of struggled along for quite a while. He kind of had some domestic issues too that he had to deal with. And maybe for feminists like myself, the resolution wasn't entirely to our liking. But that's just an opinion, of course. He disappointed his father, who had a sort of imperial notion about what he should do or they should do, and he chose another path altogether. So you have the historical Buddha representing, in a certain way, our everyday lives and our path of discovery, very much in the spirit of what Rebecca was speaking about last night. Having baggage good and baggage difficult, and what do we bring on the trip, so to speak. The historical Buddha represents something that also shows up in an interesting way, where Mara, which is this, we could say is equated with the devil, but I would say bedeviled states of mind, even showed up in the life of the Buddha as he was dying. So that the Buddha's humanness, their humanity, is something that we need to remember. Again, Rebecca and reflected this in her own sharing yesterday. In a way, the Buddha was broken, and in a way, we are all broken. And in a way, the Buddha was complete, and we are all complete, just as we are. The archetypal Buddha, though, is something that it inspires us. It allows us, in a certain way, to move together in a common light. It reflects our own awakening. It invites us to move forward in a certain way, to realize who we really are. It is that kind of big and glistening story that is exemplified in the Avatamsaka Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra, where you have this amazing description of Buddha's enlightenment, which everyone who has ever had a psychedelic can relate to. It's like, wow. And yet, what we know is Buddha's awakening also, from the historical perspective, was not just the wow, but also was the experience of a man, a person, a human being, a they and us. And then the third frame story is the story, if you will, it's like the Dharmakaya Buddha. It's that Buddha that is invisible in the Heart Sutra. You know, Buddha is not a character in the short version of the Heart Sutra who is articulated, but Buddha is actually in a state invisible, experiencing what is called profound perception. That is in the state of non-separateness with everything as it is. In a way, that is the Buddha of no rank, of no identity, of invisibility, of our fundamental nature of basic openness, as it isness, non-separateness. And in the first case of Zen Master Keizan's Denko-roku, which is a story of the Buddha's awakening, it goes something like this. The Buddha, upon seeing the morning star, awakened, and he said, I and this earth and all beings simultaneously realize the way. And as I said at the beginning of this short talk, this is one body that Bernie teaches. It is the interbeing that Thich Nhat Hanh teaches. It is praticca-samuppada. It is the interdependence, interconnectedness, and interpenetration of all beings and things. I and this earth and all beings simultaneously realize the way. Turning these stories of the historical, the legendary, and the Buddha of vastness, of no rank, toward our experience is in a way the work that all of us are engaged in, as we recognize that we have a responsibility to take care of this earth and each other and ourselves, very much in what Valerie was sharing this morning. And this taking care comes right out of the early teachings of the Buddha in the term appamada. It is what is it to actualize heedfulness or vigilance is the usual term for appamada, but I prefer conscientiousness. To live a life that is deeply conscientious. Stephen Batchelor has translated appamada as care. So I like bringing these two slightly different inflections of appamada in relation to each other, living a life that is characterized by conscientiousness and care. For me, this is what it means to be someone who endeavors to take responsibility for their lives in a way that opens their lives so they see they are not separate from any being or thing. So I offer these three stories of the historical, the legendary, and then this third story of the Buddha who has, in a way, disappeared but permeated everything. That we can rest and explore these three stories as Rebecca and Terry and Valerie and I continue with you and you online to weave the threads of our life into this whole cloth about which Rebecca was speaking last night, so that we can hold the greater world together. Thank you. Terry, I'd like to invite you. Thank you, Roshi. Good morning, everyone. It is such a privilege to be here. I just want to acknowledge the joy I feel. I could hardly sleep last night. Just thinking of all of you and what we're creating here in place on this extraordinary, energetic, online community and YouTube. It's just a marvel to me that we can all be here in presence and we feel you. Thank you, Roshi, again. Where are you? There. Thank you again for bringing us together. We never take this for granted. And to my beloved sisters and teachers, Wendy, Valerie, and Rebecca, thank you so much for what you're sharing with us. And Christiana, I'm nervous. I'll relax. Today we're going to talk about story in all of its manifestations. And I love the saying from the San people in the Kalahari Desert. A story is like the wind. It comes from a far off place and we feel it. And I'm hoping today that we will feel these stories. And in the stories that we offer you, that you will feel your own story and really think about stories as medicine. And why do these stories come to us now? The stories that we will receive, the stories that we will tell, and the stories that come to us throughout our time here at Upaya. I want to acknowledge a really important teacher who is with us today online, and that is Laura Sims. And I would not be here if it were not for her presence. And so, Laura, I just want to acknowledge you and thank you. What I would like to share with you as a community is I was, 28, I think, and I was an intern at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. And I saw on the schedule that there was a storyteller named Laura Sims that was going to be speaking in one of the galleries on star stories. So I was there, and all I can tell you is that when Laura started telling stories, the sky flew off, the walls came down, and we were a community that were gazing upward at the constellations and the stories that Laura brought to us.
And as a young woman, I was so overwhelmed and so moved and inspired that I found the nerve to walk up to her afterwards and just say, would there be any possibility we could have a cup of tea or have a conversation? And I will never forget your generosity, Laura. She invited me to her loft, and we've been in conversation ever since. So I owe so much to Laura, and I invite you to find her work. To tell a story is to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable is to be exposed. Nakedness is our shield. But we can take refuge in this understanding that that which is most personal is most general. And I certainly feel this as a writer and a storyteller, that the things that I most don't want to share because they're so personal are the very stories that I think resonate the deepest, because I have been the recipient of those kinds of vulnerable stories. Story is the umbilical cord that connects us to the past, present, and future. I don't know of anything as present as a story. When I was working on the Navajo, the Diné Reservation, I remember I was teaching the children, and we would be invited into the Hogan with the elders. And I always knew when they were telling a story, because their voice would deepen, everyone would move closer, and the children would fall asleep. And if any of you fall asleep during my talk today, I will take that as a compliment. And I want to acknowledge another one of my teachers, which is Denise Weist, who is a member, one of the women of Bears Ears. And Denise, you have been a beautiful teacher to me and remain so, and I want to express my love to you. My family, like so many in the American Southwest, are downwinders, hibakusha, explosion-affected people. And a year after my mother died from ovarian cancer, my friend David Quammen, who's a writer, he was at the Museum of Natural History where I worked in Salt Lake City, and we were loading a carousel. For those of you who are younger, that might be an artifact, with slides. And he asked me a question that was, normal. How are you? And I said, David, I belong to a clan of one-breasted women. And that was the first time I had ever voiced that. And in the moment that that was voiced, I knew there was a story in me that was so alive that I could hardly bear to tell it. 9 women in my family had all had mastectomies and 7 were dead. Sometimes it takes a friend to bring that story out of us. The story was a disruption in my family because we were told a different story, that the women in our family were weak, that we had bad genes, and that we were overly sickly. And that was the story of the men in our family. They viewed my storytelling as blasphemous, as a betrayal. But I knew the women in my family because I had heard their stories. Emily Abbott Bunker, Cynthia Celestial Bunker, Valate Lee Romney, Letty Romney Dixon, Diane Dixon Tempest. I did not see them as weak. I saw them as warriors, members of the clan of one-breasted women, Amazons. And I have never shared this publicly, but I feel I can here. I remember I wrote a letter to the patriarch of our family, of my matrilineal line. His name was Park Romney. And at this moment, there's still enough Mormon in me where I'm scared to even say this. But as a woman, barely 30, I wrote him a letter. And I said, Dear Father Park, I denounce the patriarchy because I have seen what it has done to the bodies of the women I love. And as of this moment, I reject that we are weak. I reject that we are sick. I reject that we have bad genes. And from this day forward, you as my patriarch are my equal. And we will come to know each other. I love you. Sincerely, your great granddaughter, Terry Tempest Williams. And I mailed it back to myself. Does that sound familiar? The story continues. A few years ago, my uncle, Richard Tempest, right of the right, he decided that, and I love him, he decided that he was going to run for state senator of the state of Utah. He asked if he could go with my cousin Lynn and I to the Nevada test site to see what this madness was about, as we were committing civil disobedience. And afterwards, he waited for us. And there was press there, and they recognized him. And they said, and my Aunt Ruth was home, and she was watching on the news by chance, but the news reporter saw Rich, and so they said, Mr. Tempest, that seems odd that you're here. Why are you here? And he said, I wanted to see what my generation started and how my generation can end it. And we were so stunned. And my aunt said she burned the soup. You know, these are the family stories that we all have, all of us. The story continues further. When he ran for the state senate, he said the only money he would take, except because he wouldn't compromise his values, was from the NRA. The Sierra Club was having a meet your Utah legislator candidates. And Rich asked if I would go with him. And I introduced him, to the activists, etc. And I had no idea what he was going to say. And I was really nervous, to think, how am I going to defend him? And everyone had gone before him. T was at the end of the list. And when Rich stood up, he's a man of few words. He stood up and he said, my name is Richard Tempest. I am running for Utah State Senator. I am a member of the clan of one-breasted women. And he sat down. And the whole community knew that story. And what they knew is that this issue was not just a political issue, but a social issue, an ecological issue, and ultimately a spiritual issue. And it was there that my uncle taught me how we bridge that divide, through stories. Story bypasses rhetoric and pierces the heart. And isn't that what we really want? All of us? Let's just sit with this for a minute and think about the stories that break our hearts and heal our hearts. We are one body. Our body, the body of the earth, there is no separation. May we remember this, because our lives and the lives of all we love depend on it. This is what love looks like. And this is what awakened activism feels like. The story is like the wind that comes from a far off place and we feel it. Dreams are also stories. And on March 20th, 2020, it was a week after, we all remember well, that the world was locked down from a global pandemic, COVID-19. I had a dream. And the dream I had was this. I was teaching, this is a preface, I was teaching at the Harvard Divinity School, and we, like everyone else, had to leave, and the school was shut down and it was going online. So a week after that lockdown, I had this dream. I dreamed I was walking through Harvard Yard, through those gates. It was fall, the colors were resplendent, golden, leaves, red maples, red oaks. It was beautiful. I knew I had to get to the tower. There is no tower. In my dream, I had to get to the tower. And when I saw where the tower was, as I walked toward it, I realized I had two choices. There was a staircase that went up the main tower, and there was a spiral staircase on the side. I chose the spiral staircase on the side, and it had an iron rod on that staircase, and I walked on the edge of the outer spiral staircase. As I made those rounds, I got to the top of the tower, and I realized I was standing in the ruins of Cassandra's temple. I heard my name called, and I had this feeling that I had forgotten something. I turned, and there coming up the main steps of the tower was a woman professor with students behind her, and the gate was locked. And she said, "Terry, do you remember the vow you made to us?" And I said, "Remind me." And she said, "Your vow is the epic documentation of the Glorians." And then I woke up. What is a Glorian? I was so afraid I was going to forget that vow again that I immediately got up and wrote down the epic documentation of the Glorians. Went back to bed. The next morning, of course, I went to the dictionary. I could find no definition. I went into the bowels of research, and finally I found a Kenyan dictionary of names, and Glorian was, I will read it to you. I loved it. What came up online was, the word you are seeking is not in the dictionary. And then later, I just couldn't accept that. I finally found Glorian was the name of a child of either sex that means bringing praises and worth. And I let it go. A couple of months later, I tried again. And this was devastating. Glorian in the Urban Dictionary said, excess user of toilet paper in times of crisis. And I just thought, this is not something I want to document. And I let it all go for a year. I picked it up again, obsessive, and then I found Glorian, a golden being who can shape worlds with his powers, a fictional character in the Marvel comic universe, the Dreamer, the shaper that taught Glorian to shape the dreams of others and sent them on Earth to test out their new abilities. What follows is a saga of triumphs and catastrophes and transformations. And I thought, I can go there. But then I let it all go. And about a year and a half later, I was sitting on our porch just admiring. We live in Castle Valley, Utah, not so far from here. And I was just admiring the beautiful pink blossoms on the coyote willows. You know them. They're about this big. They look like single snapdragons. I was thinking, this is so beautiful. And just then, this wind came through and just gone. They're all off, and they're all on the patio. And I just thought, they're so beautiful. I have to hold them. So I went inside the house, and I came back with a basket so that I could collect them all. While I was in the house, another one came in, and they were all gone. And I looked, and I saw one. And I bent down to pick it up, and it moved. And I realized the blossom had 6 legs. It was an ant, this tiny little ant, that was carrying the one pink blossom that survived on the back of their, holding the blossom in the mandibles, and was scurrying along its way. And our patio is, large enough that I thought, what else do I have to do? It's the pandemic. So I followed the ant. And it just kept scurrying along, carrying this, looked like a sail, going along, following. I was trying to be respectful, giving it distance. It was coming further and further, and I thought, oh no, this is going to be a catastrophe because it drops off into the desert. And just as it was about to drop off, 3 ants came, lifted the blossom off of the little body, took it across together, came down, put it back on, he grabbed, they grabbed it, came just scurrying along again, and I kept following. Maybe following for 15 minutes, and then up ahead I could see this huge prickly pear patch, and I thought, this is the end, this will be the demise, how sad. And again, 4 other ants came, lifted it together, they went up and around, down around the spines, over and under and through the patch, and there disappeared. It goes on its way. I continued following, and I could see up ahead that where the mound was. It looked like a clay-covered fist. And I watched that little ant carrying that beautiful blossom up its mandibles, up that steep hill by itself, came up on top, dropped its burden, its blossom, its beauty. And within seconds, dozens and dozens of other ants, worker ants, just devoured it, carried the little pieces in their mouths, disappeared, and I imagined that they were lining the pathway for the queen. A Glorian. I realized a Glorian is not just a noun, but a moment of grace and awe and wonder. The Glorians are among us. We'd like to invite you online, on YouTube, here, at home, we can call this home, to think about a story or a moment, let's call it an encounter. An encounter that you've had in nature. And let's find a dyad, a partner, and 5 minutes, I will tell my story to Gail, and Gail will tell her story to me. That's an example. And so in 10 minutes, we'll come back together and see what happened. Again, invitational. Are you game? And online and on YouTube, then let's give ourselves this 10 minutes, and I'll be the timekeeper. Don't think too hard about it, just what comes up. This was my encounter in nature. And then you tell me yours.
Hi, everyone. So let's take this time too to reflect about a story that we had in nature. We're too big to go into dyad because there's a limit of 100 rooms. So we are 900 people. So it would be 10 people in a room. So let's just recall a story on our own, and then you can write a small, maybe a few sentences in the chat, and then we can maybe share in the room once we're done. So just take your time. It's so wonderful to read all these small vignettes in the chat. Thank you. Keep going. Oh, there's a picture too. So wonderful. And we'll save this chat and be able to share it on the resource page after as well. While we have time, I'm just going to read a few of these. Christine said, a Glorian driving back from Black Hills to Pine Ridge Reservation at midnight on a rough back road with a Prius. I realized I had no cell phone signal and that I could likely break down. I encountered an enormous bison around a bend and stopped there. And here there was almost complete darkness and low haze and an enormous starry sky above me, complete solitude and a bison. Beautiful. Thank you. Let's see. Beth said a recent woodland walk with siblings. As we were coming out of the prairie, we realized there was a large antler was seated among the prairie plants, watching us pass. Beautiful. A big deer feeding. Tracy said, floating on my back in a kettle pond in Cape Cod, feeling supported and held by the water, feeling the sun on my skin, watching the clouds. I can almost feel that right now. Beautiful. And then Genevieve said, I remember looking up in the sky near a tall redwood tree after meditating and seeing hundreds of strands of cobwebs being carried by the wind. Wow. Baby spiders were ballooning. Amazing. Nalani says, a bear I encountered that helped me realize I loved the wilderness more than my fear. I've had that experience. It takes a little time to get to the love after the fear comes up. So many wonderful stories. Cheryl said she drove 8 hours to see the total eclipse of the sun, and it was awe-inspiring and life-changing. Was that last year? Let's see. So many amazing stories. Alan said when he was 6 years old, climbing on the apple tree on a sunny summer Seattle day, looking up in the blue sky and feeling the warm sun. Beautiful. I think they might be coming back, so.
How alive this room is. I mean, just to be able to wander and to see the joy, the focus, the sharing, the vibration, just this is the power of story. And this is what we hold. And when we hear Roshi talk about what resources us, we are story beings. May we remember this. What happened? May we just sit with this for a minute and think about what happened. Think about the story that you told, and think about the story that you received. Let's just sit with this for a moment. And we invite our friends and brothers and sisters online and on YouTube. Let's just take this moment. What happened? Who would like to share? And can we feel this tenderness? Yes.
I was thinking as I was starting to come up with this story that it's always been with me. I can remember from so young to now, it was like this panorama opened up in front of me. It was beautiful. And with that, just sitting in the comfort of that, of what's held me the whole time I've been here. And the big word, remember. Thank you.
Thank you. Two others who would be willing to share what happened. Yes.
Thanks. I felt reconnected to the realm of awe and wonder in my story and in receiving Kathy's story. And like, even in the darkest of times, it's there, in an ant, in a whale, in a tree. Like, it is a place we can all find our wonder and awe. And what a gift. Yeah.
One more who would like to share. Yes. Let's do two more since you're right in together. Okay. Excuse me, yeah, and then you, yes.
We had a group of three, and I realized in hearing and listening and receiving the two other stories that I was open to an entirely new world, and that now their world was part of my world. So it felt very expansive. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Our worlds expand with each other.
Oh, thank you. Well, the story that I've told 2 other times, but it wasn't until today, sharing my story with Susan, that a deep welling up of tears came as more and more as I told the story more and more. And it just brings up this whole thing about tears and, what happens when we tell a story from the body versus it could be the same story, but if I'm telling it in a different kind of voice, I guess, or place from which the words come, it now mine is still alive and open in a kind of unknown way. And then the same with you, I felt the tears coming also at a certain point. And so that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. That's such a beautiful reflection of embodied stories that literally come through our bodies. And I remember my grandmother always said that when a woman cries, and I'm sure it extends through all of us, when a person cries, we are the closest to our soul. And why are we told not to cry? Why are we embarrassed by our tears? Who benefits? So thank you for that. We have 3 minutes left, and I would like us to think about, and maybe we can just have 1 or 2 responses spontaneously. When you think about the landscape of the story that you told, it's like what Valerie was saying when she would always say, feel your feet, feel our feet on the ground, the heel, the ball of our foot, our toes. What's the landscape, the base, and also the bones of where we sit and stand? What's the landscape of your story? Think about that. Where does your story take place? Anyone, just an idea, a word?
Desert.
Okay.
Mountains.
Mountains. And then let's, with both of you, be more specific. Which desert?
The Red Rock Desert of northern New Mexico around Abiquiu.
We see it. What mountain?
It was the Arapahoe Lakes near Granby in the Rocky Mountains. My dad's fishing hole.
There's a story. We feel it. Then if you think about an emotional landscape, what holds you to that place? Ideas. Again, yes?
It happened in my home. So my home was...
Home. Okay, and the emotion of home. What was the emotion that was brought up?
Thinking it was safe.
Okay. Safety. Wondering. What else? Yes? Grief. So then think about the physical landscape as it is interconnected, intertwined with the emotional landscape. And lastly, what would you title your story?
Magic.
Magic. What else?
Grace.
Grace.
Joining.
What is it?
Joining.
Joining.
Sledge.
Let's just all say it almost as a cacophony of birdsong. A choir, an anthology, a community, and we hope that you're doing this in your hearts online and YouTube. May we remember what it feels like to be alive, what it means to have an embodied story heard and received. And what holds us when we remember the vows we make. To the epic documentation of the Glorians. Thank you.
Terry, it would be wonderful if the chat online has just been extraordinary. I mean, really. I mean, hundreds, almost 1,000 people online and hundreds of stories, which will be on the resource page.
Could Wendy share some of those?
But I'd love to, if we could just have a few moments to hear from our online community.
The Mormon in me is so mindful of time. So we have time.
So, Wendy La, can you invite a few?
Yes. Please raise your hand if you would like to share briefly. Ray, let me unmute you.
Yeah.
Can you hear in the
Yes.
room? Perfect.
Okay. One day I was enjoying our Rockies with my beloved childhood friend Dan, and as we walked by a spruce tree, I confessed to him that I felt that that my cells belong to and are part of that tree. And he said, "They are, you are." And today's writing that, I felt how dear that man is to have understood.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. KW.
Hello. I was in the Mojave Desert involved in some vision quests. I was associated with a group and they needed to go and have privacy and do their own process. As I was walking back to my camp, I felt my old familiar other wound, feeling a lot of pain about being separated. I got back to my car, to my camp. It was very windy and of course on the ground, all kinds of cactus. So I was just reflecting in my car with all the doors open, really feeling the pain of aloneness. And right then, two male lazuli buntings came and perched right on the door, right in front of me. And I just gazed at them. They were probably there for about 10 or 15 seconds. And I just felt, this intense belonging and reassurance, and it was very moving. Thank you.
Maybe two more. Cheryl.
Roshi, everyone. I have wanted to see a total eclipse of the sun since I was a kid. And in 2017, we had a chance to drive 8 hours and we found a camp and all these things to see it. I was a little trepidatious thinking, I'm dragging all these friends and family to see this. And the pictures look like just a black dot. And what if it's just tiny and not? When the total eclipse happened, it was spectacular. The sky filled with these delicate tendrils of light. The corona was awe-inspiring. I was so grateful and so touched and saw how wild our world is, the cosmos, that all those beautiful tendrils are there all the time, but we can't see them because the only time we can see them is when the sun and the moon come into their interconnectedness. And I realized how tame I had become. And it was kind of my start of rewilding myself to look for the tiniest sweet blossoms, the biggest cosmological events, all part of this mysterious, wild, beautiful earth that we live on. The nations are shattered, but the mountains and rivers remain. And we can pollute them, but they still remain in it. Whatever. There.
Thank you. You remind us, I was just going to say, you remind us when Rebecca asked us the question last night, what are we willing to protect?
Do we have time for one more share?
Yeah.
Yeah. Doryu.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Years ago, as I was riding my bicycle up a hill, I came across a very large rattlesnake coiled up in the street. It turns out that some workmen clearing weeds nearby had discovered this rattlesnake and in fear decided they would put him in the road so the next car that came along would run over him. I blocked the road with my bicycle and gently nudged with a rake this rattlesnake off into the weeds. A sense of connection and relationship with nature, with this rattlesnake was established. And I really feel like my life was more valuable as a result of that encounter.
Thank you. Maybe just sit for 1 minute and hold all these stories. I feel them online, here, in our own hearts. And after 1 minute, could we have a bell? And then we can take a break and return with Rebecca. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's just sit in silence and hold these stories.
Okay, everyone, just a quick announcement in case. Hi, everyone. So we're going to just return in about, and just have your attention for 1 second. We're just going to return in about 23 minutes at 11:30. So we'll see you then. Thank you.